In this series, we're going to be looking at using NIM to create and manage accounts inside Active Directory based off of a CSV of authoritative data, and doing that without having to use any kind of scripting. So we'll be able to accomplish all of these configurations directly from the UI of NIM. I want to start off and take a look at the data that we'll be working with. Now I've set up a fairly basic CSV of just some user records here, some information about their names and their IDs, maybe some job information. Now this obviously could change quite a bit depending on what we're trying to represent on our accounts. We could have 20, 30 more columns in here. We could have multiple CSVs that may be linked together, a number of different methodologies, but we'll keep it fairly basic for the purpose of this tutorial. So our CSV is going to be our source system, and then we are going to be targeting this against Active Directory. So the goal here is that we will have accounts that are being created and updated and managed ultimately by NIM by the end of the series. Now, we won't be going through every single feature and every single button here inside the NIM interface, but it is important to know that we do have the public doc site for NIM available, and it's a great resource for helping to explain more of the advanced features. So as we're going through this, if you are curious about how to handle maybe specific scenarios or what does this button do, that doc site is going to be a great resource for that. Now to start off, what we need to do is we need to actually set up our systems or set up the connections to our systems here inside the NIM interface. We're not going to use any kind of additional connectors right now, so this is all just kind of base level functionality available inside the NIM package. So from the systems overview here, what we'll do is add a new system, and I'm going to start with Active Directory. I'm just going to name our system here AD for short, and we'll submit that, and now we see our new Active Directory system created here. Now, before we can actually have this import, what we need to do is tell NIM how do we actually get to this Active Directory domain. So I'm going to click on Edit here, and there's a couple things that I'll want to fill out. In our case, our domain name is going to be t4edemo.com, and we're just going to use the service account that is running NIM to actually handle this for us. There may be times that we need to change this authentication, especially depending on the kind of security measures that are in place in the particular environment. Everything else we can leave the same. Now I'm going to hit save, and I'm also going to hit test connection here. And at the top, we'll get a nice banner showing, yep, I was able to connect to the domain, and I was able to actually read some of the more metadata here just to confirm that we can talk to the domain. We're going to move on to the configuration tab, and this is where we're going to be able to tell NIM what information from the domain should be, cached in. What data do we want to be able to view or manage within NIM? I'm going to select all of these items, but the main one that we actually care about for the purpose of this tutorial is actually just the user's object. And again, I'll go ahead and hit save, and we'll move on to the tables tab here. What we need to do now is we need to actually tell NIM what information about the user objects do we want to pull in. Now, if we were dealing with other things, say groups or computer objects, we may have to repeat these upcoming steps, but for us, we're just going to be focused on user data. So I'm going to actually open up that user table. This will take us to a slightly different page, and this will take a second potentially to load the data into the grid for us. But ultimately what we're going to do is tell NIM what attributes from the domain do we want to start and actually import. So we'll go over to our settings tab here, and this will load up all of the available attributes inside the domain for us. I'm going to select a few of them here. We have, let's see, description. We'll start there. Go ahead and bring that guy in. We are going to pull in title. We're going to pull in telephone number. And we're also going to pull in an attribute called employee ID. This one may be a little bit more obscure, but this is going to be important for when we actually tell NIM how to determine account ownership, right? So who owns this account in AD? We're going to be doing that using this attribute, and we'll talk about that more here in just a little bit when we talk about inter-system relationships. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save one more time, and we'll go back to the overview and hit import. Now down below on the screen, you'll see that we're getting the log messages here as this loads. Depending on the size of the Active Directory domain, obviously this could vary a little bit. All right, so ours is already done here. There's one other thing that I want to change about the system before we move on. And we'll actually be doing this as well for the CSV. Over on our system, I want to expand out Active Directory and go to that users table one more time. And instead of going to the settings or anything, we want to go to the columns tab here. And what this is going to allow us to do is define that there is going to be some sort of primary key on this table. So if you're familiar with, say, relational databases, the idea here is that we want to tell NIM in this table of data, this is the primary key. We can also then define a display value for this. And this is just a kind of a shortcut so that NIM knows, hey, if I'm going to reference this row of data, this is a good field to kind of display for that. And I'm just going to choose distinguish name. This could be anything, same account name, anything like that would make sense. It doesn't really matter. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that one more time. And now we'll go back to the system overview. I'm just going to collapse AD over here just so it's not taking up more room. And now that we have Active Directory brought in, we actually have data cached into the NIM service. We'll go ahead and add our CSV, or our source system, as well. So again, we'll click Add. And for the system type, I'm going to drop this down to CSV file. Now this, again, could be a single file. This could be multiple files. Just depends on the scenario. So I'm just going to call this employees. Hit save, and we have our system built here. So just like Active Directory, we're going to click on the edit button here and go in and make some adjustments. So for me, my data is stored on the local drive of this particular machine, but we could be looking at, network paths or shares out there to be able to find this data as well. I'm just going to navigate here through the directories window. All right, now that I'm at my folder, I'm just going to check the box for the files that I want to import. So again, if we had multiple files, I could check all of the associated CSVs and then hit save. All right, we'll go back to the overview now and import the data. So again, this one should be faster than we saw with Active Directory, especially if we're dealing with, maybe just a couple of files here. So that one went through pretty fast. And just like Active Directory, I'm going to expand our employees table over here, and you'll see that we have a table named after the name of that file. So we'll go into the users table here. And again, we're going to go to that columns tab. So just like we saw with Active Directory. And the goal here is that we want to, again, tell NIM what is going to be the primary key for this table of data. So this is an important understanding around when we bring in, say, a source data into NIM, is that we need some sort of primary, or we need some sort of distinct value that we can use to reference the users by. Generally speaking, we want to avoid any kind of mutable data, so we want something like an immutable ID. In my case, I have this user ID column here that'll work perfectly for that key value. I'm actually going to use that as well for the display name. So we'll go ahead and hit save. We'll jump back to the overview, and we can go ahead and re-import both of these systems at the same time, just so we can get everything kind of refreshed and we know we have the newest data here. All right, so now that we have our data imported, what we need to do now is tell NIM, how do we connect an employee record in our CSV to an account inside of Active Directory? Right, we need some way for NIM to understand that this user in our employees data is the kind of owner of this account inside of Active Directory. And the way that we do that is under the processing layer here, we have a relations button. So we'll go into that tab. And what this is meant to do is allow us to define a relationship between two sets of data, or sets of data in two different systems, I guess I should say. The way this works is we define a column in system A, and we relate it to a column in system B. So again, if you're familiar with, say, relational databases, this will work very similarly to a primary foreign key relationship between two different tables. Now, conveniently, this already has employees linked here as system A and the user ID as the column that I want. So all I have to do over here is make sure that I have Active Directory selected as system B, go to our users object table instead, And I'm going to link this to that employee ID field instead. So again, this call or this attribute that we're using here, this could be very different depending on your preference, right? So a lot of people like to use things like the extension attributes, or if they have custom schema attributes in Active Directory, those would also be great choices. Obviously, they just need to be a writable attribute inside of Active Directory. All right, so now that we have all this selected, we can go ahead and hit match at the top. And what we're going to be seeing here is 3 different statuses for our data to fall into. We have left, common, and right. And what these correspond to is the left is showing us the records in the left system, so system A, the records in that system that do not have a matching reference inside of system B, right? So in our case, we have 0 accounts created inside of Active Directory, right? This is like a fresh Active Directory. So no one exists. So we see all 9 records here. Common is for the records that exist in both systems. So if we did find some matches based off of our user IDs here, they would show up in this common tab. And then right, this is, as you may guess, the records inside of system B that don't exist inside of system A. So obviously we have quite a few different objects that just exist inside of our Active Directory domain right now, and none of them correspond to the employees list that we have here. So this is pretty much to be expected, especially in a blank Active Directory domain like we have. So now that I've matched and I know that this is looking correct, I'm going to go ahead and hit add, and this will drop it down into the inner system relationships table down here. So now that it's added, we'll go ahead and hit save. And for the first part, what we've done so far is we have added in our 2 systems. So our target system of Active Directory, we have our source system of our employees CSV. We've set up a couple of configuration details about them, made sure we're pulling in the appropriate, attributes and columns. And then we've actually set up a relationship that tells NIM how do we know how to go from a record in system A to system B, and actually the opposite direction as well. So how do we go from an account inside of Active Directory, and how do we find the kind of parent record inside of our CSV for that user? So on the next episode, what we'll look at is how to actually take this data and start to pull information from it, right? So look at primarily a list of who needs to be created inside of Active Directory. We're going to do that with filters, and then we'll also look at things like name gen and password gen before we finally move on to actually letting NIM create those accounts inside of Active Directory for us.